There we go.
Thank you.
Hi, Amanda. Hi, Amanda. I'm Jennifer. Very nice to meet you. I said this is a great idea. Hopefully you'll get a turnout. I think the rain might throw some people off. Oh, you did? Ah, good. Yeah. So those are maybe people who aren't working.
Yeah.
I just, retirees, I guess that's.
Yeah, we had some this morning that had to work.
There you go. Perfect. Yeah, that's a great ski. That's fabulous job. Oh, yeah, I remember it.
They're in the back of the original.
Yeah.
As well, right?
Yeah, yeah,
Oh,
yeah.
they're-
Yeah, this is really nice.
Yeah.
Nope, feels like her. No.
Oh, yeah. It's nice and dark. Yeah, it was all chopped up before. Oh. Oh, what's in Gotcha. Oh, wow, so you really followed Tori. Yeah. What sign was this? Oh, that was one. Oh, that is, that's actually. Still going on? Yes, yeah, still going, yeah, yeah.
So we were here with him at, it was a demo to Tokyo, and then, we were probably 75% through the reno. And he said, hey, we worked together for this many months, and he's, why don't you come on as my operations manager?
What's the sign company?
We have relations.
What's it called?
Elevations.
Oh, oh, that's you guys. Oh, very cool. Do they do your latest signs then? Okay, the ones that I designed.
They're not about there.
Oh, okay, cool.
Yeah,
Very
do
cool.
some installs.
Very cool.
We do majority of them. So. We do,
Yeah, 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 exactly.
So, yeah, my husband's the installer, and the vendor installer as well. So they run that one.
Well, then you're on top of each other.
Yeah, exactly. We had 5 years working on stuff.
Where is it? I have the front. It's a nice space, like just for this kind of stuff. This is probably like smaller services, yeah. That's what my sister had, a celebration of life.
We're gonna give people another few minutes just in case they're coming from out of town or delayed, but, does anyone else, would you like coffees? I wasn't sure if I got you in my head.
Oh, you got water, thank you.
Okay. Thanks.
This is nice. I look at all this kind of stuff. It is, so I love the feeling.
And then it's like, I don't think so.
Really nice, I like that. I think they did a great job. It doesn't look, like, even the one with flowers. Did you get all of them?
Actually, no, 2 days
There's
old.
no gold there.
Yeah? I can get it.
It's the same price we had on those.
Even having
Oh, see, I love that. Tell me the prices, like, let me know. I try not to ask any silly questions, Karen.
No, go ahead.
Except with this one. And today to save tomorrow. Wow, never get their blinds. Kelly goes. Yeah, battery. Good.
Oh.
That's it. I can.
maybe the lighting on the
Good evening, everyone. Believe it or not, there was supposed to be some more people here, but I think you guys are the only ones that toughed up the rain.
I think it is the rain.
So, thanks for coming tonight, taking time out of your guys' evening to come listen to me talk about funeral prearrangements. I'm probably the least exciting. Everybody's gonna be wanting to talk with Mayor and Neil. They handle other things that doesn't directly deal with death. So, yeah, so my name's Kevin Smith. I'm the owner, funeral director, and embalmer here at Kettle Valley Memorial. Little history about myself. I started in this industry when I was, I think, 19, and started out washing cars, working my way up, and then people think it's weird, but I've always wanted to own a funeral home ever since that time. And so, over the last, 5 years ago, I had the opportunity to quit at the funeral home I was working at and start this funeral home. We were previously at 461 Dawson Avenue. I don't know if you guys know where that is. It's a little barn building up on Dawson Avenue. And we were there for about 4.5 years and outgrew the space, as bad as that sounds. And but this place came up for lease and we jumped on it, turned it into a funeral home. Haven't lost 4 years of our lives doing the rental, but it was it's perfect and we love the funeral home here. So, but our exciting topic today is talking about prearrangements. So I was told by Amanda, who I'm sure everybody's met here, that I have to keep it short and sweet. I went a little long on the last one. So, I'm going to stick to the script tonight. If you guys have any questions, please let me know, put your hand up. And also at the end, there will be time for questions for the and answers from the three of us. So, I'll jump right into it. I'm going to talk to you guys today about prearrangements. Now, prearrangements, they involve making decisions about end-of-life services before they are needed. We can do that for ourselves, or we can do that for one of our loved ones. These plans include funeral services, burial and cremation preferences, and any financial arrangements. And we'll touch a little bit more as I go through the list here on what those are. One of the main important things about having a prearrangement is, one, it reduces the emotional and financial burden to your loved ones. Big one. A lot of people make decisions regarding grief based on how much something costs. We see that a lot through viewings. They want to see mom or dad. They find out there's a cost to that. They go, well, you know what, I don't want to view, we won't view then. So we don't charge for viewings, but I'm just saying that's one of the things, you know, when we say finances can affect, you know, the grieving process, that's what we mean. Another important thing is we want to be able to lock in costs today. So what we protect against inflation, the cost of the funeral service. Like today, if a simple cremation is $3,000, when I started here in 2011, it was $1,800 for a simple cremation. Today, in the South Okanagan here, you're going to see them go anywhere from $2,800 to $3,500. So there's quite a gap. Yeah. So we want to ensure that our preferences or our loved ones' preferences are being honored. We want to make sure that, you know, if they want cremation or they want burial, that's what they're getting. And as an executor or next of kin or person in charge of somebody's arrangements, you want to make sure that you're doing what they want. So, right, I'm going to tell you guys, you might want to write this down. With prearrangements, I'm going to talk to you guys about the two types of prearrangements. One, trusted prearrangements. That's when the funeral home itself has a has a trust account at a financial institution here in town, whether it be TD, Scotia, whatever, and it belongs to that funeral home. It's subject to a completely different set of laws and regulations, okay? That, in my opinion, aren't consumer friendly or not family friendly. The second type is insurance prearrangements. That's the type that every single funeral home will also offer insurance, and I'll get into more as to why. Now, insurance prearrangements, a lot friendlier. It is basically, there's a company called True Stage that this is gonna sound weird, every single funeral home in Canada has an account with this company called True Stage. True Stage is the biggest funeral pre-arrangement funds holder in the country. So basically, if you do a pre-arrangement with our funeral home, your money doesn't come to us here at the funeral. We'll take your money, but then we send it to True Stage. True Stage then sends you a whole bunch of paperwork saying where your money is, what they're doing with it, everything like that. The nice thing about True Stage is one, they are nationwide. So if you decide that you want to, if you're gonna move, I always say this, if you move to Tofino because you like surfing, go to a funeral home in Tofino, say, here's my pre-arrangement, I have it with this funeral home, and I want to switch it to yours. Make sure that they will honor it. That's the big thing that I was telling everybody today. You have to make sure that the other funeral home will honor the price. Most of them do. And then what will happen is they'll have you sign a form, which is called an assignment of benefits form. They send it to True Stage. Basically my funeral home's name comes off of the money. The other funeral home's name goes on. You don't lose money, you don't pay a penalty, nothing like that. It's just straight across the board. And we've even done it across the border, down in the States. We've worked with funeral homes down there too. So we had a family up here, loved one passed away down in Palm Springs. They had a pre-arrangement with True Stage, or pre-arrangement with us, but the money was True Stage. We found a funeral home down there that would honor it. They applied for it, they got the money. Family didn't see a bill, and that's how we like to do our pre-arrangements, okay? So those are the two types. Trusted pre-arrangements, it's a little scary. The funeral, we don't have a trust account with any institution, just because I don't like how it works. If you decide that you want to transfer or you're gonna move somewhere else, a lot of funeral homes will make you cancel that pre-arrangement, which allows the funeral home to keep all the interest and hold back 20% of the principal. So when people hear that, they don't like that, right? And they feel like they got jabbed because no salesman's gonna sit in front of me and tell you that, except for this one. So that's why not a lot of funeral homes really like me, because I'll let them know the truth. But so that's the two big things. With insurance pre-arrangement too, it's nice because you can do monthly payments. You can pay all up front or monthly payments. So I believe you can do 3, 5, 10, 15, and 20 year on insured pre-arrangements. Now, and that, obviously the payments every month depends on your age and how long you take it out for. Once you've paid that off, or you've paid it up front, you own that policy for the rest. You don't ever have to renew it. You don't ever have to, you just keep it in your files, and as bad as it sounds, the next step, you have to die to use it. So, okay, now, moving forward here, when we're doing pre-arrangements, some people come in, they see us, and they know what they want. They say, I'm doing this for my kids, I know what I want, I don't want any fuss, anybody, thinking that I would want something else. So usually the two things you need to think is, do I want to be buried or do I want to be cremated? Those are the two legal options in Canada right now. Okay, and so we're going to choose between burial and cremation. We need to also think about, if we're going to do burial, where do we want to be buried? A lot of cemeteries, this is another big thing, a lot of cemeteries allow for what is called prepaid grave plot. So you go to the cemetery, you can buy a plot, you can look at your plot, it's there. That's yours, nobody else will go into it. Here in Penticton, you can't do that. They don't allow that at the Penticton Lakeview Cemetery. You can reserve a plot, so they have a monthly fee which reserves a plot, and here's the thing, it's not even well, no, it is, you can reserve a certain area, pay $50 a year at the end of, let's say you pay that for 20 years, all that money that you've paid towards reserving it doesn't go towards the purchase price. And I think right now, a plot in the Penticton Lakeview Cemetery is around $4,800. So you can reserve it, but then if it's $7,000 in 20 years, you'll have to pay that $7,000. Does that make sense? Yeah, so So they don't allow for, you can prepay the niches there and the column, like that's the wall here, you can prepay those. And you can prepay like the crypts, so where they put the caskets on them. But as far as ground plots, you cannot do single ground plots anymore. So always, when you're doing pre-arrangements, it's just something to think about as well. Do I want to prepay? Do I want to, can I prepay a grave? Can I just reserve it? Or my family will deal with it at the time of. In your pre-arrangement, and this is generally speaking for every funeral home, you can put aside $5,000 in your pre-arrangement to say, okay, this $5,000 is going to be specifically for the grave plot. So, like I said, in 20 years, if it's $7,000 for the plot, well, we've already put $5,000 towards it. Your family would still have to come up with the rest of that. It's what we call a disbursement. So it's not costs that the funeral home controls, it's something we don't control, so we can't guarantee those costs, okay? And just to touch on the financial aspect of everything. Now, like I said, when we do pre-arrangements, we lock in the costs today. Now, when there's a pre-arrangement, there's two sides to it. One is what we call is just the funeral service side, so that is what we call is the guaranteed funeral services. Professional fees and staff services, documentation. You guys will see, I think there's price lists in there. You guys will see on there, we have simple cremation, traditional, you'll see professional fees and staff services, documentation, transfer of deceased, care of deceased, cremation fee, things like that. You know, all those different prices. Those are what we call our guaranteed costs, okay? Because we control those costs. So if those costs go up in 20 years, you've locked those in today, you will not pay a cent over and above what those costs are. Same with casket, basically anything that we control, casket, urn, cremation, jewelry, whatever, those are guaranteed, you will not pay 1 cent over. Disbursements, obituaries, flowers, cemetery, clergy, things like that, stuff we don't control. So you can put money towards them, but if it's a little bit more money at the time of your passing, the family has to cover the over and above. Does that make sense? Perfect. So, moving on. Or sorry, I should ask, does anybody have any questions as of right now? Yeah.
So, for example, if you sell your business
Yes.
to another party,
Yeah.
are these costs then like still set?
Yes. As long as this place remains Kettle Valley Memorial, you are covered. What has to happen is if I was to sell this company, which I have no intentions to, especially not after all this,
Yeah.
if I was to sell to somebody else, new ownership by law has to send out it's not by law, but most ownerships do send out letters to state, hey, listen, we're the new company that owns Kettle Valley Memorial. We want to let you know that yes, you have a pre-arrangement with us, and it's still honored, everything like that. So you don't have to worry about that. In the event, I'll bring this up because it's come up before, in the event we were to close or go out of business, that's another really good thing about having your money with True Stage, because you could just go to another funeral home and say, hey, I gotta switch this pre-arrangement over to you. They just have you sign a form and it's done. Okay? Does that answer your question? Perfect. Go ahead.
I was gonna actually ask what you just answered.
Okay,
so-
perfect.
Yes.
Perfect. So, when it comes to doing a pre-arrangement, we want to make sure that the services that we're providing reflect the personal values and preferences of the person doing the pre-arrangement. Sometimes, like I said, that's the kids coming in and they're doing it for mom or dad, or it's the actual person coming in. They do the pre-arrangement in a way. I mean, a lot of people come in and they say, "Hey, listen, I just want to get this part done, so that my kids don't have to deal with it." Whether it just be a simple cremation, or if there is a religious background or they want to have some type of service, they have that written down in a folder on paper that says, "Okay, this is exactly what I want." There's no confusion. Okay. when it comes to doing pre, and I can't stress this enough, we got into it with the group this morning, is you have to make sure that you do your due diligence when entering into a pre-arrangement or choosing a funeral home. Because not all funeral homes are the same. And you know, you may go into a funeral home and it just might not be the funeral home for you. So I always tell families, meet with the director, see the facility, make sure it's somewhere where you're comfortable with your family. One, with you when you pass away, where you're going. Two, make sure that it's a funeral home that you're gonna feel comfortable, that's gonna deal with your family. Has anybody ever seen the stereotypical funeral director that's tall, skinny, pale? I mean, I think we all think of it when we think about funeral homes, but we want to make sure that that funeral home is going to fulfill the wishes of the person or of you, and in the way that you want it done. Upselling is a thing in funeral service, so you have to be very, very careful of it. Even with pre-arrangements, some, you know, I've been a part of funeral homes where you're basically taught, okay, this person has a pre-arrangement. How do we upsell them on other things so we can bring that up? We don't do it here. I hated that part of funeral service, or of doing pre-arrangements. So when you come in here and you want to do a pre-arrangement, you tell us what you're looking for. We give you your options based on what you're telling us. Okay? So just make sure that when you meet with a funeral director, you feel comfortable with who you're dealing with. Also, make sure that you're comfortable with them taking your information, because they're going to ask you for a lot of what we call as vital information. So name, social insurance number, care card number, address, basically everything that is your whole identity needs to go down into these forms. We take that information at the time of the passing, upload it with BC Vital Statistics. It's part of registering the passing both provincially and federally. But you just want to make sure that you're trusting the person that you're giving that information to. Okay? Yep.
Have you heard incidents of, because just the fact that you brought that up, is that a thing in this industry then?
It's not.
Breach of information? Okay.
No, but people do ask the question that you just asked. It's not an issue
Okay.
in funeral service, but people ask questions just, hey, I'm giving you personal information. Why do you need my social insurance number? Why do you need this, right? And we have to explain it, and I'm like, well, we can do it without it, it's no problem, but
Just easier.
it's, yeah, with getting all the information, you guys will see in there, yeah, in there, I think we also have a vital statistics form in those folders. You'll see that's all the information that's asked of you during an at-need arrangement. Okay, so how do we communicate pre-arrangements to our families? Some people come in before Christmas. They say, "Hey, I'm paying for my funeral, and we're going to give it to the kids for Christmas." They do. Yeah, birthdays.
Awesome.
Yeah. They come in. Yeah, and they go,
Oh, that's cute.
"We're going to give it to the kids." So that's one way to communicate. You've done a pre-arrangement, but I think it's important to have an open conversation with your loved ones about your plans, especially if we're dealing with more than one child. Like my family, there's 5 of us, and it's a split family. It's going to be atrocious. I already know that. When my dad goes, I told him, I said, I don't even really want to be part of this whole thing. So, because there's too many. My oldest sister's like 50, and my oldest brother, I think, is 60. So there's quite a age gap between us, and 2 of them are executors, co-executors, but one's from my mom's side and one's from my dad's. Oh yeah, I was just like, listen, if I have inheritance, give it to me now, because I don't want to deal with this later, right? So, but it's important to definitely have that conversation with your family. However you decide you want to, that's up to you. But having that conversation and making sure that the family knows, okay, these are my wishes. It's all taken care of. All you have to do is follow the funeral home at the time of my passing. Okay. Now, it doesn't hurt to also when we do pre-arrangements, there's gonna be 3 copies of your pre-arrangement. I mean, 2 to go with yourself. Keep one for yourself. give the other over to your next of kin, your executor, and then the third one stays here at the funeral home. We keep it on file, and so that if for some reason they can't find, and this happens a lot, we'll get phone calls at 10 o'clock at night saying, my mom's passed away, we think she has a pre-arrangement, we don't know, can you tell us? We come, we look, if we have it, we let them know, if we don't, we don't. So it's just, there's always gonna be 3 copies somewhere, just know the main one will be at the funeral home, okay? How am I for time, guys? So I'm gonna kind of just get into, if you guys have any other questions, like I said, after the seminar here, just come on back and ask me questions after or when we open up to everybody else. Just to summarize some key points, like I said, when it comes to a pre-arrangement, our main thing is we want to emphasize that we want to emotionally, we're removing that burden from our family of having to take care of our arrangements. It's tough for people to come in and have to actually, they might, and you know what, they're fine, some families, they're fine until they walk in through that front door of our funeral home, right then and there, it breaks them. So to know, example today, we had a lady come in, her husband passed away, she had a pre-arrangement, she was here for 15 minutes. She signed the stuff we needed, and then she was gone. And she was even at the end, she was just kind of like, oh, okay, great. Now I can go home and relax, right? It's tough, so we want to ensure that we take away that emotional burden of, okay, what do we do now? What's the funeral director going to tell me? All that kind of stuff. We also want to financially lock in our costs and make sure that everything's taken care of, that time of our passing, there isn't going to be any other costs unless your executor next of kin decides, no, we're not going to use that urn, we'd like to buy that, right? Then they'd have to pay for a separate urn. And just the big thing too is it's a huge personal benefit to just all around having your estate planned, whether with your pre-arrangement, your will, your power of attorney, grief counseling, things like that. It's very important to have those lined up. When you're putting your estate together, it removes a massive burden to everybody. So I'm going to stop now because you got 2 more speakers. But like I said, if you have any questions, just come on up and ask me after the thing. Okay? Perfect. I think right now, Mayor's going to come up. Does everybody know Mayor? Oh yeah, right. Yeah, that's what yeah. So I don't need to go into how she's a #1 selling author, her books here if anybody's interested. Mayor and I have known each other for a few years now and have helped each other on both ends of this side of life. And now luckily have the ability to work together. She's one of our, did you say in-house counselors? We have families that are looking for some help. They can either get in touch with Mayor through our website. We have an area on our website that goes directly to her, or reaching out to the funeral home and we can put her in touch. So just so you guys know, here she is. Okay.
So Kevin asked me today to come in and chat to you a little bit about grief, about counseling, and then also I have had the experience of being an executor. So how that's been for me, some things I would maybe suggest, and things that were helpful as well. So a little bit about my backstory and how I got here. I have experienced pretty significant loss in my life. I lost my dad when I was 19. I became a widow at the age of 33. And then just last August, we lost my mom. And going through those losses, I've been a public figure for a very long time. I was on the radio for a long time. And I was open to sharing my mental health and open to sharing about grief. And it was something that I felt really passionate about. And then wrote this book, Find Me Your Cape, became a #1 bestseller on Amazon. And and then I started to get people messaging me, asking me for counseling and for therapy. And I just didn't really feel comfortable. I thought, well, I know what worked for me, but I sometimes didn't know why or how it would work for someone else. So went back to school and got my bachelor's of social work, so I'm now a registered social worker and therapist. So I like to pair my life experience now with academia to help people. I really love to have clients come in and create a safe space to talk about grief, as well as a myriad of other things that we all go through. And another big passion of mine is supporting the caregiver. Sure, we all know someone, or some of us ourselves know the unpaid caregiver. There's over 9 million of them in Canada, and I honestly think that's a really low number. I'm sure there's many more. Whether you care for your parent, your grandparent, your spouse, your child, a lot of our world relies on that unpaid caregiver. And when you are the person looking after someone, the support is usually in the person who's in need or in pain. But I like to look to the person who's supporting them and make sure that they have what they need. I myself am a caregiver. I have a somehow now 13-year-old who was born deaf. He doesn't speak, he has autism, and he also has epilepsy, so he has seizures. So Thomas is a huge part of my life, and also a huge part of why I like to support other caregivers. Even if we have, I have some clients who have supported their spouses, as I did with my late husband, or their parents, but it's just something that I'm, as you can tell, very passionate about, and I really love to mention that because Kevin's mentioned, he'll have people come in here who say have supported a spouse through a very long illness, and then they pass away, and there's a lot of mixed emotions. There's relief, and then there's shame that there's relief, and then there's grief, and it can be very confusing. So I really love to have people in. And I don't know if, everyone's been to counseling. I feel like it's becoming more acceptable. For a lot of people, it was a very shameful thing. It could just be because I'm in that world, but I think one misconception about counseling is like, you have to go weekly, and you have to go for a really long time. But you could go once and get what you need. Like when I got married in my 20s, I couldn't fathom walking down the aisle without my dad. I went to counseling once, got enough tools, and it was like a beautiful day, and I laughed walking down the aisle with my brother. So it doesn't have to be this like long drawn out thing. I will have clients that come in and they're like, I need help with this one issue, no problem. You don't have to get into your childhood, as many people think you have to, and then they go on their way. And one thing that I do like to share, whether you are grieving or you know someone who is or will, we will see people who have just suffered a loss, but if you've ever experienced loss, the first 6 months, even longer, is a blur. I remember I couldn't finish a sentence when my husband passed away, like I was just trying to survive. And so I will see people who have just had a loss, but often I'll say like, give yourself a few months and then come see us, because however we can support you, but you probably won't even remember we had this conversation, and that's totally fine. So whether you are grieving or you're someone who is supporting someone who's grieving, I like to talk about what's called the grief energy model. And there's 4 phases, but the first one, when you're in that initial phase of grief, if you picture like a pie, and there's just one slice of the pie that's cut out, so say like 1/8 of a full pie, that one slice for your energy is survival. So like sleep, eat, shower, the bare minimum. And the rest of the pie is just grief. So like really taking the pressure off of yourself to get back to your normal life or put really high expectations on yourself, like grief and a little bit of survival. And that's all we should be expecting our energy to take up. Now, I mentioned we lost my mom this past August, which was a huge shock. Honestly, we thought we probably had another decade with her. But I am the executor of her estate, and that's been a very unique experience, something that I feel like we don't talk about enough. And it wasn't until I became one that then I found out people in my life were one, and we could commiserate, as I'm sure you know if you've been one. But today I wanted to share some things that were helpful if you're creating your will, maybe on who to choose and what to do, and then also if you find yourself being an executor. So something my mom did that was very helpful was a few years ago she had her will redone and added me as the executor, and then showed it to me. And she had someone else make it up, and Neil, who you're about to hear from, is my lawyer, and so we booked an appointment with him. He went through it with me and my mom. There was a few questionable things, so it was nice to like really understand what was gonna be expected of me, what my mom wanted, and know the ins and outs of it. I found that really helpful. And then she also went through and talked to everyone who is listed as a beneficiary, which some people will say is good or bad, but in my case, it was helpful because people are getting different amounts for different reasons, and she was able to really explain it, and everyone signed off on it. I would, when you're making your will, try to make it as specific as possible. My mom's is quite specific, but then there's like some things that could be ambiguous or vague. So for one small example is the estate is responsible for repairs on her home. The person who lives in her home is responsible for maintenance. But like, what's what? Is a repair just the roof? Is it the dishwasher? You know, like, what is the maintenance and like what level is that? So that's pretty vague. And so far it's been fine, but we will see. Another thing, I don't know if we would have gotten to this with my mom, but as I said, it was a complete shock. To simplify what you can with your documents, or at least like list where they are, where you bank, maybe where you have investments. So she like banked at 4 banks. So to like, you know, chase all of that. And then there was someone in her life who was insistent that she had a 5th bank. So then I had to have Neil write a legal letter to ask, and then, you know, it's just like another thing. One thing, because we did use Kettle Valley Memorial, like I cannot stress enough. What's that list called again, Kevin?
Estate Settlement Service.
So that is like all of the things that they will cancel that I hadn't even thought of, which was like, I can't even put a good numerical value on how helpful that was. To come in and he was like, here's all the things you have to take care of, and me having a blank book, and Kevin's like, would you like me to? Yes, please, right? I think, I know my mom chose me because I'm the only local child. So I think being local does have its benefits. So when you're deciding who to choose, but also really understand, like my mom's will is quite straightforward. It's still been like a part-time job being the executor. So many meetings, so many decisions. So making sure that that person will have the energy, the capacity, the time. Also, like, are they good with paperwork? Does paperwork intimidate them? Can they go to meetings? Can they ask questions? Like that sort of thing. And I go back and forth on this one, like, I was surprised as the executor that I was getting called about the estate before she even passed away. So she was in the hospital, we hadn't actually lost her, and I was already getting questions as the executor. So like, you are thrown right into it. So had her executor been someone who was maybe not family and removed a bit, they could have taken that on and we could have just been left to say goodbye to her. But also, like, I'm very honored to be the executor at the same point, to make sure that her wishes are carried out is exactly what she wants. So I kind of go back and forth with, is it better to have a family member or not? I don't know. And then some things that I think, if you are an executor, if you do find yourself in my shoes, one, like I said, I've used Kettle Valley Memorial, my goodness. Like, Kevin was just so wonderful, and I don't know how he understood me when I called him to say that she passed away. I was like so out of my mind, and he just like came, was very matter of fact, factual, like this is what needs to be done, and that's what I needed. I didn't need someone who was gonna, you know, grieve with me. I just, like, what do we have to do here? And he took care of so much of it. She didn't pre-plan, but I feel like we had enough to go with. If you are an executor, like, really remembering to be kind to yourself, take your time, and remember that you were chosen for a reason, and that person, your loved one who passed away, picked you for a reason, and that it's your choice, your responsibility, your role at the end of the day. Have a good lawyer. Can't recommend Neil enough. We have had so many meetings, and he helped me through stuff that, like, I had never done this before. I didn't know probate. I didn't understand things like get the house assessed. Like, just all things that, you know, he does on a regular basis that were just, again, invaluable. One thing that we did almost like the week she passed away was we went to Service BC and got her mail forwarded to me. And that has been great because like so much stuff has shown up I wouldn't have known. It was inexpensive and very easy to do, so we got it forwarded for a year. So paperwork would come, even stuff that surprised me, like from a government who knew she had passed away and was still sending her mail. So it was nice that it comes to me. And then one like, you know, not so great thing was at Christmas getting cards and realizing like my mom was an immigrant. Okay, we didn't tell those people in England or Australia, that sort of thing. So it has been very helpful. Contracting things out like a lawyer, like an accountant, because you do have to do their taxes, not feeling like you have to do everything yourself. There was something that for me was very helpful because my siblings live like, one's international, one lives a 2-day drive away. So they're not here, like they're not doing the day-to-day stuff. As the executor, you could take, what is it, 2 to 5% of the estate. So I was like, okay. My husband and I were like, okay, we can have like a little, at the end of this, you know, all of this like pain, sweat, and tears, we will get a little, I guess, wage for it. And the last thing I would just say is that it takes a long time. Like estate stuff, they're not kidding when it takes, they say it takes a long time. Like probate, just the banks, like everything. And I felt this real rush to do things. And as Neil will talk about, like there's legal amounts of days where you can't do anything or you have to sit on stuff. So I guess reminding yourself that it takes time and giving yourself a little bit of time to process your grief in the same way has been helpful for me, because I definitely felt like a sense of urgency. I think to get it over with or to try to make all the beneficiaries, you know, happy, but it takes a while. So anyways, that's been my experience as an executor, and also a little bit of my background as a counselor. Finding Your Cape, you can get it anywhere books are sold around the world. Digital, paperback, audiobook that I recorded in my bedroom closet. I can read it to you. Do you have any questions before I hand it over to Neil? I can also answer questions at the end privately or once we all come up here. Yeah.
You said, as being the daughter of your mom, you found it an honor. You know, I'm considering my son being my executor, but if you had to do it again, would you have wanted to have been your mom's executor? You would, okay. So you didn't feel it like because that was a concern, would that be, he's, like you mentioned, you're grieving, but is it putting too much more in addition? Like, is it common that kids are the executors, or should it be a close family friend or a slightly more distant family member? Or?
I think if she had a friend here who was maybe like older than me but younger than she was, that would have been nice, because it is a lot. It's a lot. Also, I feel like I'm in a unique situation in that I also have Thomas.
Yeah.
So our hands are quite
Your time
full.
Yeah.
But I say it's an honor because like I know I will do it exactly as she wanted. There'll be no like funny business. You know, Neil's always assured me I've done everything by the book and stuff. So, but it is a lot. It is a lot to deal with. I think if I hadn't already had significant loss, or if I hadn't now gone to school and unfortunately had a lot of experience with grief, if it was my first, I don't know, it's hard to say. Maybe talk to him about it.
Yeah.
And see, or also then have a girlfriend and say if he needs help. Not the co-executor, but just can you like support him or yeah.
Okay, thanks.
All right, answered all my questions. All right, Neil, the expert. The really exciting.
He's gonna blast this one.
That's the exciting part. I'm Neil Wiper. I'm the lawyer at Wiper Law. Our office is down on Scott Lake Road, across from the Best Western, not far from the beach. And today we're talking about planning and rearranging things. So the big thing I want to talk to you about are wills, and then a couple of things that go along with those. So I think kind of behind what the Mayor and Kevin have both been talking about is the idea about control. Everybody wants to have control over their future, what's going to happen to you during the rest of your life, or what happens to your family after you die. And so the big legal tool that we want to think about, or at least start with, is wills. So a will is simply a legal document that describes what you want to have happen someday when you die. And it can be very simple and it can be very complicated. It all depends on your family, the things you own, and what you want to do with those things when you die. So I guess to start with, we can talk about what happens if you don't have a will at all. So on TV, it seems like if you don't have a will, the government comes along and they take everything, and your family gets nothing. And that's not at all what happens in BC, or Canada at all. If you don't have a will, then there's statutes in each province that describe what happens to the things you own. And basically, if you have a spouse and you have children, things go to your spouse and your children. If you don't have close family members, it'll go to your closest relative, branching out from there. And there's rules for figuring out who is closely related and what their share would be. Sometimes that's a good plan, and sometimes the rules would kind of match up with what you want in your will anyways, but not very often. So one big example is in the traditional family where you have two spouses and some children, if you don't have a will, when one spouse dies, the things they own gets divided between the surviving spouse and the children. Now typically, parents don't want to give things to their kids right away. They'd rather that instead of the surviving spouse having to give up half of what they own and give it to the kids right away, most couples want the surviving spouse to enjoy the things they own for the rest of their life, and at that point, give everything to their kids. So having a will is the way that you get control over how that might look. So you can make sure that things go to the surviving spouse and to your children in the ways that you want. The other big consideration is if you have any children or anyone that you're wanting to give a gift to that is less than 19 years old, unless you have a will that sets up a trust properly, then the gift, instead of going to that minor, goes to the government instead. So the BC Public Guardian and Trustee holds the gift for the minors. They don't keep it, it's there for the person you want it to go to. And they invest it in a very, very conservative way, and they charge you fees for that privilege. And then the government, some bureaucrat, decides how to use your money to care for your kids or the person you wanted to give a gift to. And for the most part, that's not a good outcome. If you had if you thought about what you wanted and you put that in your will, you can have a much clearer, better plan for how a gift would go to your children or grandchildren or nieces and nephews or whoever you want to give things to. Another big example would be blended families. So if two people come together later in life and they have their own children individually, if you don't have a will, then often the way things would flow is a very different outcome depending on which partner dies first. And so by having both spouses make a will, we can avoid having a race that we have the same outcome or very close to the same outcome regardless of which partner dies first. So all those things together really just kind of say that a will is the tool that gives you control over what happens after you die. And it can be as simple as saying, I want everything to go to my spouse. If my spouse has died before me, then I want everything to go to my kids. It can also be a lot more elaborate. We can deal with things like putting money in trust for someone with disabilities so that it doesn't interfere with government benefits. We can use trusts to protect, if there's anyone in your life with suffering from addictions, we can put money in trusts so they don't have too much money all at once. We can use trusts so that money is paid out slower. If you have someone in your family that might spend money really quickly if they received it, then we could basically set up an allowance so they receive it over a period of time and they don't blow it all quickly. So there's a lot of different things that we can do just to adjust how things go to your family. Another big part would be that if you don't have a will, when you die, there is nobody who is automatically legally in charge of the things you own. So nobody can go and deal with your bank accounts, nobody can manage your investments, nobody can deal with your home until they get an order from the court. So having a will lets you appoint an executor that's responsible for those things. We're gonna skip over the next part. But the whole idea is that the will gives you control over who's doing the work, and then also what work they're doing for you and for your family. A will is also the place where we talk about a guardian if there's any minor children. If both parents die, then the will is how you appoint someone else that would take care of your kids until they reach 19 years of age and they can do things on their own. I'm gonna shift from wills now. Wills are really important, but they only talk about what happens after you die. While you're alive, a will is just paper on your bookshelf or wherever you've stored it, and it doesn't help you at all. So if you have a horrible car accident, you have a brain injury like a stroke, then your will is not something that helps you during your life. Two things that do help you are powers of attorney and representation agreements. I recommend that essentially every adult should have a will, a power of attorney, and a representation agreement. And they're kind of silly names, but the power of attorney is a legal document that lets you appoint someone that will help you with your legal and financial affairs while you're still alive, but at a point in your life where you need help or you just simply want help. Separately from that, a representation agreement is how you appoint a person that can make medical decisions for you while you're still alive. And they're separate documents because they're very different roles. So someone in your life that might be a good choice to help you with your finances might not be the person you would ask to make medical decisions for you. So you could choose someone to do both roles, but they are separate documents, so you can have separate people doing those things. If you own real estate, and especially if you own real estate together with anybody else, then there's really not much more to tell you. You should have a power of attorney. The reason for that is if you ever get badly hurt, if you're in a car accident and you own, let's say you own your home with your partner, and you're both on the title, if one of you is incapacitated, if you're unconscious or have a major brain injury, then it might make sense for the healthy partner to get a new mortgage, so the money in the bank, or maybe to sell the home so that you could just make life simpler. If you have a power of attorney, then you can sign the paperwork as yourself, and you can sign the next line as the attorney for your partner. If you don't have a power of attorney, then you're stuck. The only way to sell real estate or to get a mortgage would be to go to court and convince a judge that this is the right thing for your family. That's expensive, and it's going to take you at least 6 months to deal with this. And it would also be happening at a time when your partner is hurt, and it's the last thing you want to be dealing with. So really, if you have real estate, you should just simply make sure you've got a power of attorney. And so the last one with a goofy name, the representation agreement, is just for medical care. In different provinces, it's got a different name. Alberta calls it a personal directive. Ontario calls it a power of attorney for health care. And they're different in each province, but they work in the same ways. The basic idea is that your representation agreement lets you choose a person that you trust to make decisions for your medical care. And if you don't have one, then there's a set of rules for deciding who would be able to make most decisions for you. And so if you don't have one, spouses can make most decisions about your care, but there are restrictions on what they can do, mostly around major interventions and end-of-life care. But the bigger issue would then be what happens if your partner is not available. So if both of you are in a car accident or if your partner has died, the representation agreement is how you make it explicit who's next in line to help you with medical decisions. And it can be surprising who would be next in line. So if you have multiple children, then if you're hurt, then simply any of your children would be able to make decisions for your care. And it's effectively a race for who gets to the hospital first. And because we don't know who that person is, like we don't know which of your children might be first in line, then their hands are tied somewhat, fairly significantly actually, in the kinds of things that they can and can't do for you. So by making a representation agreement, the legislation is recognizing that you have the time while you're healthy to pick a person, talk to them about the things you do and don't want, and then their job is to follow through if you're ever hurt, to make decisions in the way that they believe you want for yourself. Now because you had that chance to talk to them and choose that particular person, the restrictions are removed and they can make almost any decision about your medical care. The only real exception is that their job is entirely focused on your health, so a representative can never ask for anything to intentionally end your life. So no MAID, no euthanasia, nothing like that. But the step short of that, anything else your representative can help you with. And so it's an important tool for making sure that if you ever are in a lousy situation, that you get the care that you want and not what somebody else decides is best for you. So basically, my recommendation is everybody should start with a will, a power of attorney, and a representation agreement, no matter how old you are, no matter how healthy you are, because if you're in a car accident, if you have a fall and you hit your head, it's too late to make some of those documents. So it's just important to do them while you're healthy, and as much as it just truly sucks to be thinking about what happens if I get hurt, what happens if I die, how are my kids gonna get by without me? They're really negative, awkward, uncomfortable things to think through. But literally, I've been doing this for 12 years now. Literally everybody that gets to the end of the process and signs their paperwork, they're visibly relieved that now there's a plan in place that no matter what happens, things will go at least according to plan. Maybe not the way we want them to overall, if I've been hurt, but at least someone that I want is making decisions for my care, and I know that someone can manage my banking to make sure my kids are housed and fed and those kinds of things.
Can I ask you a question about that? If you don't have that, is your spouse automatically able to make those decisions or no?
Your spouse, on the medical side of things, your
Yeah.
spouse can make most decisions,
Okay.
and there's a bit of a distinction, I guess, or some wiggle room between the black letter of the law and what's going to happen in a hospital or in hospice. But from the legal sense, there's definite restrictions on what a spouse can and can't do.
What about a child?
Uh,
An adult child? So if I don't have a spouse,
Yeah.
I'm in the
So if
hospital,
your child's
just like what
taking
you're
care of
talking about.
you?
Yeah, is he able to go in or would I, in that case, need a representation agreement?
So if you don't have a spouse, children are next in line to
They
make
are.
decisions.
Okay.
Like I said, it's a race, so we don't know which of your children if you have several. So it's just one, it's fairly clear who it would be. But again, because you haven't had the opportunity, or it's not clear that you've had the opportunity to discuss your wishes with them, then his hands are tied somewhat.
Gotcha.
So they can make sure that you get kind of basic things, a private room in the hospital, they can make sure you get the kind of general things that you want. But when there's a really big decision to be made, then there's more and more restrictions about what they can do.
Yeah, thanks.
So the representation agreement, really, the two parts to it are that it blows away those restrictions. So the person making decisions for your care can make all of the decisions that are appropriate for you. And the other is that we can have multiple backups. So that if your son is who you want doing that, but if he's been hurt or if he's traveling, we can be clear who's next in line. So beyond those three documents, there's lots of other things that people can consider depending on your family, the dynamics of your family, or the kinds of assets you own. So we can talk about managing your assets to minimize taxes and probate fees. We can talk about managing putting money in trust to take care of your children for the future. But it really starts with those three documents, and that's where everyone really needs to focus to begin. And from there, once you've got that in place, you can make a more robust plan as time goes by.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Have you heard of a professional executor? Or
There's lots, yeah. You're asking me about like, choosing family members to be an executor and how it goes. There's a lot of ideas about who you should choose for your executor. And sometimes parents think that their kids choosing a child is a gift to make them your executor. It's anything but a gift. It's, apart from Mary saying it's a privilege to do it, it is a really big choice. And choosing one child over another, maybe less than a gift, it's actually almost a punishment of saying, here's a big job for you to do. And the main reason that you might consider family is because, like Mary mentioned, an executor is entitled to collect a fee for their services. When it's family, often they'll choose a smaller fee or no fee for providing that service. But if you don't have someone that you're comfortable asking, there are lots of professionals you can go to. Each of the big banks has a trust company attached to it, and they will provide executor services. Many lawyers will, some accountants will, but it really comes down to simply any adult that you are comfortable having in that role can do the job. And they're allowed to collect a fee either up to 5% if you didn't say an amount, or an amount that you agreed to, a percentage or a dollar amount. So there's lots of different options, and it just comes down to whether there's someone in your life that you would ask, or whether it's better to just hire someone at arm's length to just get the job done.
Right, does your office do that?
We do sometimes.
Okay.
My experience just recently with the bank was it was a very expensive proposition.
Oh, is that right?
The amount they gave me was $30,000.
Wow.
And it often, the banks often charge a sliding percentage.
Yeah. And
So start at a high percent for the first 500,000 or million, and then a slightly lower percentage for the next amounts. But 5% of $1 million is 50,000 right off the
well,
top.
there you go. Right.
And that's a fairly ordinary house and some small savings, right? So it's pretty easy for an estate to be $1 million or more. Go ahead.
So what then are your thoughts in adding your kids, like say, onto your bank account? Say, he's passed, I'm gonna. Or vice versa. Or vice versa. Joint. Oops. And adding your kids then onto.
Yeah, so
is
the
that-
main reason that people would choose to try and add someone as a joint owner is trying to avoid probate fees.
Yeah.
And so probate fees are effectively a tax that the BC government charges when you go through the probate process. I didn't talk about that, but not every estate needs to go through probate. Generally, or often, spouses organize things so that when one dies, the survivor doesn't need to go through probate. Not always though. And then when the last spouse dies, most of the time, that estate will have to go through probate. And the government charges probate fees. It's a funny calculation, but it's effectively 1.4% of all of the assets that go through your estate. And so one of the ways to avoid probate fees is to simply not own things when you die. And an easy way to do that is to have someone as a joint owner on an asset, because then the instant that you die, you stop owning it, and the other owners, however many there are, their ownership grows to fill in the gap. So if there's you and one child, you each own half while you're alive. If you die first, then your child's half grows into the whole, and they own the entire thing. That asset doesn't go through probate, so there's no probate fees on it. And so, as a starting point, that sounds great, but there's a few different risks. So, okay. There's a couple of things to be aware of. One is that adding a child as a joint owner of any asset means that they own half of that asset. So if you're talking about your home, they own half of your home in the same way that you do, which means if you wanted to sell your home, they need to sign to cooperate. If you wanted to refinance and borrow some money against the equity you have, they have to cooperate. Even if you want to repaint, they have to agree to the color because they own half the home. So you give up an awful lot of control. The other part would be if your child gets in trouble somehow, completely innocently, they're getting sued, the half of your home that they own, or the half of your bank account, is an asset their creditors can go after. And so, generally speaking, if it's your home, I would discourage parents from adding a child as a joint owner because we don't want you to lose your home. And if it's the lion's share of your savings, probably would also say the same thing. If it's an extra, like a vacation property, if you've got more than enough to live on separately, then maybe a different investment it might make sense to add your children onto. But you just need to be aware of the risk of what you're taking on by doing that. The other thing to be aware of is that when you when you transfer an asset, so if you already have an investment for example, in shares, if you then want to add your kids as a part owner, then for tax purposes, that would be a disposition. You would be effectively selling half of your shares at the fair market value, and that's what your child would acquire them for. So you'd pay your capital gains tax at that point instead of in the future when you die. So sometimes we're spending more now trying to avoid some tax later. And it can be even worse with different kinds of assets. The cost of transferring it with things like property transfer tax on real estate can add up to more than the savings and probate fees, and it brings in those risks. So it all depends on your situation and what makes the most sense. For anybody that's 65 or older, there's also different options where you keep ownership of the investment or the property, and you effectively transfer it to yourself in trust, which, as weird as that sounds, is a valid way to transfer assets and avoiding capital gains tax. And that can be a different way to pass things to your family and avoid probate fees. So that's only available to people that are over 65.
All assets, or just financial?
Yeah, it depends on a lot of things.
Okay.
So generally speaking, it would be things like real estate or shares and investments, things like that.
What did you call that?
That is either a alter ego trust if it's just you, or it can be a joint partner trust if you and your spouse arrange that together. And alter ego just means that the thing that you own is being transferred to you to hold in trust for yourself, which some lawyer came up with years ago, and somehow it actually works for taxes.
One thing I wanted to bring up, so everybody knew here as well, so we're talking about probate, is Neil and I actually worked on a case together of somebody that had lost a loved one. They were the executor of their parents' estate, and even though there was a will, and I think she was the beneficiary as well, the bank still made her do probate, even with a will. So, Neil, can you go into a little bit?
So what's probate?
Because here's the thing, a lot of people think, well, there's a will, you know, we have it all like, so there's not gonna be probate. No, if the bank for any reason, the way I understand it, if the bank for any reason can decide, no, this needs to go to probate, then they can hold things up.
Yeah. So the basic idea is, we're going through all the process, we're gonna help you make up a will. The will is the legal document that describes what's gonna happen when you die. All those things are in place. There's no question about that. It's rock solid, we're good to go. But then the problem comes that someday when you die, let's say Kevin's died, and I'm his executor.
Yeah,
See, it's
pretty
imaginary,
So, Kevin died yesterday. I've got his will in my hand, I'm his executor. And I go to the bank and I say, okay, Kevin died, here's the death certificate, here's the will, I'm in charge, give me Kevin's money and I'll deal with the estate. And the banker says, well, that doesn't look like a will, so what's going on? And I say, okay, well really, it's Kevin's will. And I convince them that it's not a forgery, this really is Kevin's will. And they say, well, that still doesn't look right, are you sure that it's good? And I say, trust me, I'm a lawyer, it's a will. And they say, okay, well, great, it's Kevin's will. But that says 2017, how do we know that he didn't make a new will last week before he died? Because making a new will automatically revokes old wills. So I'm standing there, I'm holding Kevin's will, and I can't convince the banker that this really is the one that we should follow. And so what the banker says is, Neil, go away, go get a grant of probate and come back. And so probate is the process where then we take this will, so Kevin's will, we all know that this is Kevin's will, but nobody else trusts us yet. So we take this will, we send it to court with a bunch of extra paperwork that explains who's Kevin's family, what things does Kevin own, and kind of circumstances around what's going on. And what we get back from the court is a court order attached to a photocopy of the will, and that's what we call the grant of probate. The grant of probate is not appointing me as Kevin's executor, and it's not doing anything to make the will more than it was before, except that what the court is saying is that this really is the will that everybody should follow, and then I really am the person named in it that should be doing the work. So it's a process. Roughly, probate is Latin for prove, roughly, and it's proving that this document is Kevin's will. And so when I go back to the bank now, they're not following me and this strange document that doesn't have any writing on it. Now they're following a court order that says this is what they should follow, and that I'm the person that should be doing the work. So probate is all about kind of the same thing we talked about with the certainty, about making sure that everyone's doing the right thing, they're following the right plan, the right person's doing the work. It's the last step of that, of carrying through the whole plan. So by itself, this is great, because it gives everyone the confidence that we're doing the right thing. The bank knows that if they give Neil the money today, then Mayor's not gonna show up tomorrow with a better will and ask for Kevin's money a second time. So it's a good process. BC saw this as an opportunity to collect some tax. So as part of that court process, the very last step, the registrar signs off on the grant of probate, but they won't give it to your executor until the executor pays the probate fees. And so that is roughly 1.4% of everything you own. It's a weird calculation, but that's kind of where it lands. So $14,000 per $1 million. And you only pay that if your will has to go through probate. So depending on how you arrange your assets, your executor might not need to go through probate. And that's things like, if the banker looks at your account and says, well, there's only $20,000 here, we're gonna take the gamble, we're not gonna make you pay a bunch of legal fees and go through this process, we will let you have the money now. So if the estate's small enough, often you can skip that, but it's entirely discretionary. So where one executor goes to the bank and they're told that at $20,000, that's the cutoff, they have to get probate. We've also seen other clients go to the bank for $80,000 and have no problem with their probate. So it's entirely up to the bank. But the bigger one is, if you own real estate, flat out, land titles is not allowed to transfer ownership without a grant of probate. So when you own real estate jointly, then when you die, it just takes a death certificate and some forms, we can take your name off the title. But if you want to take it with your partner, when the last of the two of you dies, sure thing, your estate has to go through probate to deal with the land at least. So, in a nutshell, that's what probate's all about. It's a good process from the legal side of things, but a lousy process from the tax side of things. And so, we want to be keeping that in mind. We're looking at plans of how to avoid probate fees, that we're not missing out on some of that certainty that we get from the probate process, and that we're not spending more money trying to avoid the fees than we would actually save just by sticking with an ordinary, simple plan. Did that answer your question?
Yeah, got it.
It's probably a good place to stop. Does anybody have questions for any of the three of us?
I have one last one.
Yeah.
So coming back to the banks and the executor, so what if you have expenses, like say for example, paying the funeral home out of, but you don't have probate, is that, have you still?
Yeah, they'll still pay expenses for you.
Okay.
Most likely they'll pay directly from the bank, correct? From what we see on our.
Usually, so it all depends on the banker that's across the table from you. But usually a death certificate is enough to show that somebody's died.
Yeah.
And then if you provide a bill that the person owes, then they'll make a check from the deceased person's bank account to pay that bill. So often, even if they won't deal with you until you get a grant of probate, they'll still help you to pay the bills along the way. So funeral expenses, legal fees, probate fees, often would come straight out of the deceased person's account. The challenge comes where someone owns, say $1 million of real estate, and they organize their investments so that everything goes to beneficiaries. It's all in RSPs or RIFs or TFSAs. And when they die, there's just no cash left. Then there may be large fees to pay, funeral expenses and probate fees and legal fees, but there's no cash to pay those things. And that's where the challenges often come up for families of, we can't go ahead unless we have the money from somewhere. So the executor may wind up loaning money to the estate until they get the grant of probate and sell some assets so that they can get paid back.
And my experience was, if it was a bill, I didn't have a problem, like her visa, phone bill, funeral, that sort of thing. But I can't do any like beneficiary things until we had probate. The only beneficiaries that were paid out was if she had an investment or an account, like a TFSA, that it wasn't going to the estate. She had like someone's name on it, then it wasn't my responsibility at all. But I didn't have any problem paying any bills. But yeah, we did have to wait for probate, and that's another like reason why it takes a while, because probate takes months, and then there's 180 days.
That's 210 days actually.
210 days until you can pay people. So it's kind of nice to get a long.
That was my question, so probate, you can, it's, you said 280 days?
No, so
Or 10.
typically to go from when somebody's died to
Yeah.
have a grant in your hands, if we can get all the details that we need quickly, we can have it granted to you usually within 3 months. The part that usually delays that would be when we can't get people's addresses or we can't get bank balances, sometimes banks won't cooperate. So getting information can take time, but otherwise the court process generally is about 3 months.
So, but if you've got all your ducks in order, like you said, like in your will, be as thorough as possible and all of that kind of information, should that help this probate process run smoother?
It helps a lot, but the wills don't describe where you have your investments or what the balances are when you die. And some of those details are what we need in the probate application to tell the court.
Gotcha.
So
It's
even
even
when
like,
we're organized, there's still a bunch of legwork for your executive to do
Okay.
afterwards. And then the 210 days that Mayor's referring to is after the grant is issued by the court, there's a waiting period of 210 days before you're allowed to distribute the estate to the beneficiaries. But if all of the beneficiaries sign off, we can shorten that down. So basically there's a 180-day window where spouses and children have the right to challenge the will and say they want a bigger share. And there's another 30 days of padding added on the back of that. And so if everybody signs off saying they're not going to challenge the will, they're satisfied that it's your will, then we can shrink that time right down until wherever the executive's at.
A lot of info.
that's why I think it's good to talk about.
It is.
Like, no one talks about
It
it
is.
until you're grieving and you're in it, right?
Yeah.
Unless you have Neil on it. He knows all about it.
Yeah, and that's one of the big things.